Millionaire CEO goes on a blind date as a mechanic, unaware his date is a billionaire mom of twins. He sat there with the engine still running, staring at his hands like they didn't belong to him anymore. They were rough, cracked, stained black with grease that wouldn't come out no matter how hard he scrubbed. For a second, he wondered if this was the moment he should turn the key and drive away, because once he opened that door, there was no going back, and he wasn't sure he was ready to be seen like this. Caleb Warren had spent most of his life being noticed for all the wrong reasons. People saw the money first, the success, the last name that opened doors without asking. They never saw the quiet parts, the loneliness, the way conversations changed once numbers got involved. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight, he wanted to be invisible. If you believe in compassion and the quiet strength of ordinary people, take a moment to like and subscribe. Stories like this remind us how one small act can change everything. The uniform felt heavier than it looked. Dark blue, faded at the edges. His name stitched above the pocket like it belonged there. He'd worn it all day on purpose, crawling under cars, letting the grease sink into his skin. No cologne, no watch, no signs of the life he actually lived. Just a mechanic showing up for a blind date. The place was small, warm lights glowing through the windows. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed first impressions or hidden agendas. Inside, people laughed, talked, lived their normal lives without knowing how fragile everything really was. Caleb watched them for a second longer than he should have. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket. A message from the friend who set this up. "She's kind. Please don't overthink it." Caleb almost laughed at that. Overthinking was the one thing he'd mastered, especially when it came to letting someone close. He checked the time again. He was early, which somehow made it worse. More time to doubt. More time to imagine the look on her face when she saw him. Not the CEO version. This version. He took a slow breath, the kind that's supposed to calm you down but rarely does. Tonight wasn't about pretending to be poor or playing a role. It was about finding out who stayed when the labels were gone. If anyone ever did. That thought sat heavy in his chest. Caleb reached for the door handle and paused. Because once he stepped inside, he wouldn't know who she really was either. And somehow, that felt just as dangerous. He didn't know it yet, but this choice was about to change more than one life, and it would start the moment he opened that door. Caleb pushed through the door and felt the warmth of the place settle around him, the kind that made people slow down without noticing. The smell of coffee mixed with something sweet and familiar, pulling at memories he didn't usually allow himself to linger on. He made a conscious effort to relax his shoulders, moving like someone who'd spent the day working with his hands, not someone used to being watched. When the hostess asked for his name, he gave the one he'd practiced, the version of himself that didn't trigger curiosity or assumptions. They seated him near the window, snow drifting past the glass in quiet, uneven patterns. Caleb chose the booth instinctively, the slight enclosure making him feel less exposed. He slid his hands under the menu, aware of the dark stains beneath his nails and the soreness in his knuckles. That discomfort reminded him why he was here. This wasn't a costume or a game. It was a boundary he needed for his own sanity. He knew how quickly money changed the temperature of a room. He'd watched conversations shift the moment people realized what he had, curiosity turning into expectation before his eyes. Over time, that pattern taught him to measure every smile, every question, for motive. He didn't resent people for it, but he resented what it did to connection, how it made affection feel conditional. Loneliness had become easier than sorting through intentions. Tonight was his attempt to interrupt that cycle. He wasn't inventing a new personality, only removing the label that distorted every first impression. He wanted to listen without planning, to speak without strategy, to let silence exist without rushing to fill it. The rule was simple: show up honestly and accept whatever came, even if it meant rejection without the protection he usually carried. His phone buzzed with a message from Darius, the friend who'd pushed him into this blind date instead of letting him hide behind work. Darius was one of the few people who never adjusted their behavior around him, not when the company grew and not when success became visible. That constancy mattered, because it reminded Caleb his loneliness wasn't about a lack of people, but a lack of being known. This date wasn't meant as entertainment. It was a nudge back toward real life. Caleb looked around the room. grounding himself in ordinary details. Couples talking quietly, a server moving with practiced ease, a child asleep against a parent's shoulder. No one here cared who he was, and that should have felt freeing. Instead, it made him aware of how much of his identity had been shaped by being needed rather than understood. Without that, he was just a man waiting. When the door opened again and the bell chimed softly, Caleb felt his chest tighten. He wasn't afraid of being judged anymore. He was afraid of being seen clearly. Whatever walked through that door would meet him without context or protection. And he had no idea that the life stepping inside was about to challenge not only his disguise, but everything he believed about connection. The bell over the door rang again, sharper this time, and Caleb looked up without meaning to. A woman stepped inside, brushing snow off her coat with one hand, while holding the door open with the other. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep, and everything to do with responsibility. Her hair was pulled back quickly, not styled, and her eyes scanned the room with the kind of focus that came from always having to be alert. Then two small figures followed her in, bundled in matching coats, their boots thumping unevenly against the floor. Lila Monroe paused just inside the doorway, bending slightly to speak to the girls at her side. Caleb couldn't hear what she said, but he could see the care in the way she knelt to their level, steadying one mittened hand while fixing the other girl's scarf. The twins looked around with open curiosity, not shy, not loud, just taking everything in like they were used to adapting. When Lila finally stood, she took a breath that looked like an apology before she even spoke to anyone. It was the kind of breath people take when life never quite gives them a clean entrance. She spotted Caleb's name on the small sign at the edge of the booth and hesitated, her expression flickering with uncertainty. For a second, it looked like she might turn around and leave, like she was already calculating how awkward this was going to be. Instead, she squared her shoulders and walked over, offering a smile that was warm but guarded. The smile of someone who had learned how to be polite even when things didn't go as planned. "I'm so sorry I'm late," she said, her voice calm but honest. "My sitter canceled at the last minute, and I didn't want to just disappear." Caleb stood instinctively, unsure whether to shake her hand or stay seated, then settled for a soft, "It's okay, really," because it was. He noticed the way her eyes flicked briefly to his hands, then back to his face without judgment, just awareness. The twins watched him too, one from behind her mother's leg, the other leaning forward slightly like she was already curious. Lila gestured gently toward them. "This is Harper, and this is Mila. I understand if this isn't what you signed up for." For a moment, Caleb's carefully constructed plan wobbled. This wasn't a simple date anymore, not something he could casually walk through and walk away from untouched. Kids change the temperature of a room, change the stakes without asking permission. He thought about the door behind her, how easy it would be to say he had another commitment and let her off the hook gracefully. But something in Lila's face stopped him. Not desperation, just quiet honesty. "It's fine," he said again, slower this time. "I don't mind." They slid into the booth together, Lila guiding the twins to the inside like muscle memory. Harper climbed in first, confident, while Mila paused to look at Caleb once more before joining her sister. The table suddenly felt smaller, warmer, fuller in a way Caleb hadn't expected. He noticed how Lila kept one hand lightly on the edge of the booth near the girls, present even while sitting down. This wasn't chaos. This was a life that ran on adaptation and small compromises, and he found himself unexpectedly respecting that. A server came over, offering menus and crayons without missing a beat, clearly used to moments like this. Lila thanked her with genuine relief, then looked back at Caleb, her expression searching, like she was bracing for disappointment that hadn't arrived yet. "If you want to keep it short, I understand," she said quietly. Not accusing, just realistic. Caleb shook his head before he'd even thought it through. "We're already here," he replied. "We can see how it goes." As the twins started coloring, the noise of the room seemed to fade into the background. Caleb felt something shift inside him, a small but undeniable pull away from his original expectations. This night was no longer about testing whether someone would like him without knowing his status. It had become something else entirely, something messier and more human. And as he looked across the table at Lila, He realized that this unexpected complication was about to lead them both somewhere neither of them had planned to go. As the menus lay unopened on the table, an awkward quiet settled in. Not uncomfortable enough to be rude, but heavy enough to be noticed. Caleb could feel the weight of his original plan slipping through his fingers, replaced by a situation he hadn't rehearsed for. He watched Lila carefully, noticing how she tried to keep the mood light while clearly managing 1,000 thoughts at once. This wasn't nerves about a date. It was the constant calculation of a parent who couldn't afford to fully relax. And suddenly, Caleb felt like the one out of place, not her. Lila apologized again, softer this time, her eyes briefly dropping to the table before lifting back to his face. She explained that this was her first blind date in years, that most evenings were planned around homework, bedtime stories, and early mornings. She wasn't asking for sympathy, just stating facts, the way people do when they've learned not to expect flexibility from the world. Caleb nodded, listening more than speaking, aware that anything he said right now mattered more than usual. He could feel the familiar urge to fix things rise in him, and he forced himself to sit with it instead. The twins were quiet, but not withdrawn, their small movements steady and observant. Harper colored carefully within the lines, tongue pressed lightly against her lip in concentration. Mila, on the other hand, kept glancing up at Caleb, studying his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Caleb shifted slightly, uncomfortable under that kind of attention, because kids didn't care about the stories adults told themselves. They saw what was in front of them, not what you wanted them to see. And right now, he wasn't sure what that was. When the server returned to take their order, Lila let the girls speak first, patiently waiting as they debated between pancakes and grilled cheese. Caleb watched the exchange, the gentle redirection, the calm authority that didn't need to raise its voice. There was something grounding about it, something that reminded him how small and fragile adult concerns could be when placed next to real responsibility. He ordered simply, matching the tone of the night, not trying to impress or stand out. Every instinct he had told him to keep things surface level, but the moment demanded something deeper. As the minutes passed, Caleb became aware of a growing discomfort that had nothing to do with the situation itself. Being here, watching Lila juggle politeness, care, and quiet exhaustion, forced him to confront a truth he usually avoided. His loneliness had always been abstract, wrapped in late nights and empty penthouses. Hers was practical, lived out in missed sitters and cancelled plans, in showing up anyway because disappearing felt worse. The contrast made him feel strangely exposed, like his carefully hidden wounds were suddenly visible. Lila caught him staring and offered a small, apologetic smile, misreading his silence. "I promise I'm not always this chaotic," she said, trying to lighten the moment. Caleb shook his head gently, choosing his words with care. "It doesn't feel chaotic," he replied. "It just feels real." The word surprised him as much as it did her, hanging between them with unexpected weight. For a brief second, Lila's guarded expression softened, then returned, like a door opened and closed just as quickly. Inside, Caleb felt a tightening he hadn't expected, a sense that staying here meant stepping into emotional terrain he wasn't prepared for. He could already imagine how easy it would be to get attached, to care in ways that made walking away complicated. This was the part of connection that scared him. Not rejection, but responsibility. If he stayed, even emotionally, he couldn't pretend this was just a casual experiment anymore. And he wasn't sure he knew how to show up without hiding behind something. As the food arrived and the table filled with small comforts, Caleb realized the real descent had already begun, not into embarrassment or failure, but into vulnerability, the kind that doesn't announce itself loudly. He could feel the choice forming quietly beneath the surface, the choice between keeping his distance or allowing himself to be present. And whatever he chose next would change the shape of the night in ways he couldn't undo. It happened in a moment so small, Caleb almost missed it, the kind of moment that doesn't feel important until it changes everything. Mila looked up from her drawing and pointed at his hands with simple curiosity, not judgment, just honesty. She asked why they looked hurt, why the skin was rough and dark in places like it had been through something hard. The question landed softly, but it cut straight through every layer of preparation Caleb had built around himself. Kids didn't wait for the right time, and they didn't care about appearances. They just asked what felt true to them. Caleb hesitated, his first instinct to give a short answer and move on, the way adults usually did. But something in Mila's eyes made that feel wrong, like lying would be louder than the truth. He told her he worked with cars, that fixing things meant using his hands a lot, and that sometimes they paid the price for it. He didn't exaggerate or perform. He just explained it the way someone explains the weather, as a fact of life. Mila nodded slowly, satisfied, as if that answer fit into a larger picture she was building. Lila watched the exchange closely, her attention no longer split between manners and logistics. She noticed how Caleb didn't brush the question off or joke his way out of it, how he didn't flinch when a child saw him clearly. There was a softness in her expression now, cautious but present, like someone testing whether it was safe to lower their guard. She asked him about his work, not in the way people asked out of politeness, but with genuine interest. Caleb answered without thinking too much, describing long days, stubborn problems, and the quiet satisfaction of making something work again. As he spoke, he realized how much he missed talking like this, without strategy, without framing his words for impact. He didn't talk about growth or vision or leadership, just effort, patience, and showing up even when it was exhausting. Lila listened, nodding occasionally, her shoulders easing with every sentence. She shared a little too, about how life hadn't gone the way she expected, how plans changed the moment she became responsible for more than just herself. There was no drama in her voice, just honesty shaped by experience. The twins began to relax, leaning closer to the table, coloring with less intensity as the tension drained from the air. Harper chimed in now and then, asking questions about cars and whether they all sounded different, while Mila stayed quiet, watching the adults with careful interest. Caleb found himself smiling without realizing it, the kind of smile that came from being present instead of performing. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not excitement, not fear, but a calm curiosity about what might come next. Lila laughed at something he said, a real laugh that surprised both of them. It wasn't loud or dramatic, just warm, the kind that made the moment feel lighter without erasing its depth. She admitted she'd almost canceled when the sitter fell through, assuming he wouldn't want to deal with the complication. Caleb told her he'd almost left when he saw the girls walk in, and they shared a brief look of mutual understanding. It was the first time the night felt balanced, like neither of them was carrying it alone. Underneath the conversation, a quiet shift took place, subtle but powerful. Caleb realized this wasn't just about being liked without his money, it was about being trusted without proof. Lila realized this wasn't another man making promises he couldn't keep, but someone willing to meet her where she was, even if it was inconvenient. Neither of them said these things out loud, but they felt them, and the feeling stayed. The blind date had stopped being an obligation and started becoming a shared space. As the plates emptied and the noise of the room faded back in, Caleb sensed that a line had been crossed, even if no one named it. This wasn't a turning point fueled by romance or revelation, but by recognition, the quiet understanding that something real had just happened. He didn't know what it meant yet, or where it would lead, but he knew one thing for certain. Walking away now would feel very different than it had before. What surprised Caleb most wasn't how easy the conversation became, but how intentional it felt once it did. He wasn't trying to impress Lila or win her over. He was trying to stay present, which somehow took more effort than any pitch meeting ever had. He asked about her life in small, careful ways, not digging for details, just opening space for her to share what she wanted. Lila noticed that immediately, the absence of pressure, the way he didn't rush her answers or steer them toward something lighter. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she wasn't being evaluated. Lila talked about the twins with a kind of steady pride that never tipped into performance. She didn't describe motherhood as a miracle or a burden, just as reality, something that reshaped every decision without asking permission. She mentioned how most people disappeared the moment they realized her life came as a package deal, how understanding faded once convenience was gone. Caleb listened without interrupting, without offering fixes, and that alone felt like help. Sometimes the most generous thing a person could do was simply not look away. Caleb shared more than he planned to, not about money or success, but about exhaustion. about how being responsible for so many people had slowly isolated him. He talked about how his days were full of conversations that never felt honest, how everyone wanted something from him even when they pretended they didn't. He admitted that pretending to be someone else tonight wasn't about escaping his life, but about remembering who he was underneath it. Lila didn't judge him for that. She just nodded, as if the logic made perfect sense. When the twins grew restless, Caleb offered to take them outside for a minute so they could stretch their legs.